alluded to quite a few times, I guess, through the whole kind of project in the summer about the work we're doing with our farmers. So very exciting piece of work. It's been going for the best part of probably 18 months, getting on for 2 years now. So, and it's probably the mainstay of the work we're doing in chalk, cherries and chairs, and the main part of our habitat project. So great to kind of share with you just some of the great work our farmers are doing and some of the momentum the cluster's now getting, and where your work fits in context, really. So there are lots of other things around other projects, as I say. I'll schedule those kind of in for the new year, but mainly tonight we'll focus on the work that's coming from and through and being delivered by our farmers in the cluster, because some really exciting pieces of work happening there. So all part of our wider project funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, our landscape partnership scheme, of which we're getting on to say for 2 years into now. And there are a number of elements to the project, but my main focus on my colleague Harriet. I'm not sure if she's on the call tonight, but if she's not, then no, I'll make sure she gets correct, because she's making a massive difference in terms of delivery. But really focusing in on the wildlife areas, on how we actually get to grips with them. We use this phrase kind of a lot, on how we genuinely get to grips with landscape scale conservation. So not conservation on an individual reserve or an individual site, but how we actually stitch it together to make sense on a landscape perspective. And that means in our case, essentially the Central Chilterns, so the Buckinghamshire part of the Chilterns. So in essence, our work with the farms has been born out of, anybody you know recognises the picture of the guy in there, please unmute and shout, but I'll kind of come into in a minute. But the work of the guy in the left-hand picture there, Professor Sir John Lawton, who published his report getting on quite a few years ago now, really about the change we need to make if we genuinely want to make landscape scale conservation work. So making sure that what we do is better, and we make our better sites as good as we can. So that our triple SIs or our nature reserves and our existing local wildlife sites as good as they possibly can be. But really a challenge out that we need more of them, and they need to be bigger. And more importantly, they need to be better connected. If we're really going to make sure our butterflies or our birds can actually move through the landscape and can work, we need to do more than just work on our existing sites as we've gone through. And that is a kind of a mantra, I suppose, if you like, has sat behind a lot of the planning and the work we're doing with our farmers. Not to the exclusion of other sites. So to make our sites in our Central Chilterns better, we've spent quite a bit of time in the first couple of years working with some local wildlife sites. So this is Chiltern Forest Golf Club here, where we've done quite a bit of scrub clearance work on their grasslands around their fairways. We've supported Beebout to put in a new, it's like some kind of lunar landscape there, but to dig a new chalk scrape up at Dancers End Nature Reserve. So creating more micro habitats and microclimates up in the chalk grassland at Dancers End. This is a picture from some ride scalloping that we're doing over a rotational ride piece of work with Forestry England up at Wendover. The Bitham's Wood, creating kind of rotational habitat around the woodland rides there. And a similar kind of project with the National Trust at Bradnam, creating kind of woodland ride creation there. So we're doing a number of bits of work with our better sites, if you like, if that's the right way of describing them, on our NGO sites. But ultimately, if we really wanted to achieve landscape scale conservation and make the difference we want to do, and when I say just, I don't mean just, but just doing work on our sites is not really going to be the big kind of game changer. So really the beginnings of the piece of work when we were putting the development phase and the bid together, we're saying if we're really going to crack this, we really need to engage more of our farmers and our private landowners across the Central Chilterns to work with them, to support them, to help them to put in place habitat creation projects if we're really going to make a difference. So we set about a couple of years ago starting to talk to our farmers across the patch and say, well, what is it? What are the issues? What are the barriers, if you like? What are the reasons, or what are the things that we could help you with that would really make a difference for you to want to get involved in conservation, for you to want to get involved in habitat creation projects? And they told us a number of things. I guess, as you'd expect with some farmers, they were quite blunt and quite forthright in their views, which really helped focus the mind as to what we need to do. But in essence, their feedback boiled down to us genuinely, the NGOs, the conservation networks, genuinely building a relationship with their farmers. Not coming to them when we've pored over a map and said, well, we're really interested in something we might be able to do in that field over the back of the farm over there, or coming to them when we've got a particular theme or a particular ask. And equally, and when I say polo shirts, don't all come to me on different days with your different shirts on, talking about your different interest groups. So whether you're talking about birds on a Tuesday, or you come and knock on my door to talk about butterflies on a Wednesday, or you come and talk to me on a Friday about plants, or a Saturday about carbon, or whatever it is, actually, can you please join it all up? And more importantly, get me excited about what's on my farm, and help me to achieve what I want to do on my farm with the wildlife that's on my farm, rather than something you want to achieve from a more strategic kind of central perspective, and build a relationship, if you like, with me. And from that stemmed essentially, so the kind of key themes that really kind of bored out of that conversation as it evolved, that if we're going to work together, and we need to be working together as farmers. We need to actually collaborate more. We need to work more joined up, not just because we're neighbours to each other, but our habitats are neighbours as well. So can you help us collaborate more? Can you help us build an evidence base of what we've got on our farms? A lot of the farmers are kind of saying, well, I couldn't tell you a yellowhammer from a linnet from a corn bunting if I saw one together. I couldn't tell you a Duke and Burgundy from a chalk-hill blue butterfly. Help me with evidence and help me understand and get excited. Help me engage and enthuse me about what I've got and what I can do on my patch, and make it fun for me. Make it fun rather than come in with a particular form I've got to fill in to get some money. Help them make it fun. And then the other key thing really is actually on the back of it. If it's going to work, I need a real kind of what we're calling an end-to-end package of support. So it's all very well you be able to give me some advice on what I might be able to do on my farm, but what do I do with that advice? How do I turn that advice into a project? Where do I go to source a contractor, or to source materials, or to source trees, or to get various help? Equally, where do I go to get funding to help me to deliver that? It's all well having advice, but where do I get the money to put the project on the ground? And even when I've done that, how do I know if it's been successful? If I've done my particular project, I've planted my hedge, or I've done my scrub clearance on my grass, and how do I know if it's made a difference or not? So can you help me with monitoring and helping me understand, again, the wildlife and the habitat conditions? So essentially from that conversation, we distilled that down, and from that was born the farmer cluster. We now have 18 farms in our cluster group, and the ones on the map are all the shaded farms on the map are the ones that the guys are members of the group. Some of those farms, I guess you'll know, you'll probably live next door, or you've surveyed them, or you've walked through their farms, and they provide a brilliant way of connecting up the habitat. The only key areas that aren't really joined are the darker green areas. The map doesn't really kind of show brilliantly here, but these kind of areas in here, the darker green areas, and they're mostly areas of woodland. Obviously, the farmers don't themselves manage the woodland or manage the woods. So from a connecting habitat piece, we've got pretty much connectivity across that stretch of our project area, and one or two outlying farms on the bottom that are joining in and doing a brilliant job. So our chair, Ian Waller, has done a great job in putting together his neighbours and other farmers in the area to want to work together to be part of this cluster group that is really starting to take hold. So I guess a lot of the work that we're doing has emanated from that feedback, and a lot of what we've done and why we've done it and how we've done it has been born out of trying to meet the requests of the farmers in that period. And what that really is boiled down to is actually this kind of relationship. We've made massive progress by making it fun, getting out there and spending the time to either walk around the farms and get to know the farmers. I don't know how many hundreds of miles I've done walking around the farms on the cluster group. We've got a WhatsApp group, which is brilliant for everything from a bit of banter to a bit of mickey taking to sharing of photos to sharing of ideas, and it really helps keep the group together as a fun group. We meet informally in pubs. We've eaten a lot of pies. We've not drunk too many pints, but a pint and an informal atmosphere makes a massive difference in bonding the group together and getting them into trust and understand and get excited about what we're doing, and what price a bird in the hand, metaphorically and literally. And Pete, you and your colleagues and others, Linda Ringers, who've done a storming job here and actually bringing wildlife to life for the farmers, really, and understanding what they've got and getting excited. Well, I never knew what that was on the hedge that down there, or that little brown job. Actually helping them find that kind of information out has made a massive difference. So it is a fun group. It's an informal group. And I guess my role and Harriet's role is to service that and keep it fun, keep it exciting, and keep the kind of content coming, if you like, to give the farmers what they need to look at the wildlife on their farms. But ultimately, it's relationship building, and it takes time. And it's only really now 2 years in when we're starting to see the rewards, if you like, of that time staying out there, when farms are really now confident to either let volunteers onto their farms or start to get involved in some projects. So So I guess the rest of the session, really, I'll try and break that down and share with you the kind of things that we've been doing and the kind of difference it's now making on the ground, and stuff you should now start to be able to see as you wander around the farms in the cluster, on the footpaths and the areas, start to see the kind of the fruits of the labour. So the first thing we did really on this was actually based on that evidence area, was actually, and a number of you will be on the call tonight, and thank you again for your time. It has made a massive difference in terms of a cornerstone, if you like, of setting out a series of really informal kind of winter bird surveys on farms. We're just going to be entering in February. We'll be doing the 3rd year of them now. And that makes a huge amount of difference, having someone who really knows their stuff on a farm with the farmer, or reporting back what they found on their individual farms. We've recorded 86, probably, actually now having updated that, we've probably recorded more now, getting on for 90 species on these surveys, which when you immediately think that, well, 90 species on Chilterns farms, where are they going to come from? But actually the birds are there. We've had some brilliant records. One of the farmers found a couple of short-eared owls on one of his fields wintering last winter. One spring, sent a photo through, saying, what the hell's this on my farm? Very strange looking bird. And I had a stone curlew stop by on migration coming through, as well as the kind of the resident birds and the wintering birds. So it's been a brilliant exercise in getting farms engaged and understanding the birds that are actually out there and getting to look. I guess really, if nothing else, what I'm saying, well, I never really looked before. Still don't know what one looks like, but now I'm looking and I'm starting to understand what's there. So that cornerstone, really, we did quite a bit in terms of presenting these kind of things back to farms in some of our cluster meetings, and just some graphs, really, and some of the numbers from the farms there. And some farms recorded 50 species, obviously a sliding scale depending on the size of the farm and the habitats around. That really played to that kind of inner competitiveness, I guess, of the farmers. When I said, well, I've got 50, you've only got 30, well, I've won, and we gave them all a bottle of cheap plonk and a bottle of cheap chocolates for the most species. And that kind of competitive and really playing to that, oh, I want to get a bit more, I want to be the next species coming through, really helped to kind of energize the group, I suppose, and engage them into wondering what the farmer birds they have on their areas. And we kind of then brought that down and started to make a kind of slightly more serious point and saying, well, actually, from the farms in the Chilterns, which are mostly arable farms, not all arable farms, but mostly arable farming across the piece, the farmer birds were the real kind of focus of what is a farmer bird. But essentially, we're looking at our yellowhammers and our linnets and our corn bunting, scarlarks. I really tried to look at it in a bit more detail and said, well, actually, guys, it's great that you've got these numbers of farms have had these kind of birds recorded on your surveys out there. A number of farms with it, and obviously a sliding scale yellowhammer you'd expect on the majority of farms, and linnet on most, and a smaller number still holding corn bunting territory. So we kind of said, well, that's brilliant. You've got these farms, are getting them excited. The farmer birds are still there. They're still out there in the Chilterns are on your patch. And we still have breeding territories of corn bunting. I'm not quite sure if it's too dramatic to say we have a stronghold in around the Stormington area, but it probably is in the context of Buckinghamshire, which again really played to the fact that there is some really exciting wildlife still out there on your farms, really worth kind of fighting and getting excited about. And we're now starting to prove where those characters and build those data records. But there was also a bit of a but to that conversation as well. So when we start to break it down across 18 farms, just 4 have got corn bunting still. These are on the surveys coming back, and 11 farms with linnet, 7 farms, therefore we didn't record them, didn't say they're not there. But we're starting to say, actually, and some of the numbers on those farms are still relatively small, so they're present, but the abundance is not so strong. So we kind of paid it back to the farm and said, well, it's brilliant that you're still providing that habitat, but it's a little bit almost like birding in Noah's Ark. There are kind of on most farms, there's kind of a pair here or a pair there, or there's a small territory here or a single record here. So what can we do now to make sure that whatever we do, we can make sure that your farmer birds are still here in 10, 15 years time, and play that. And the guys took that message really well, actually, that kind of positive, but also, come on, we need to act now to do something. So we kind of said, well, what can we do now? But largely focusing on farming birds. And this was the first kind of entry into kind of practical projects with them. The screen seems to have frozen. 1 second while I've got a frozen screen. Oh, there we go. So we talked through, well, actually, one of the simple things we can do, and this is not asking farmers to really change their farming too much, is look at winter feeding for farming birds. So we used the project and we put the offer out there, and this was this winter, previous winter. We put the offer out there using the lottery money to say, well, actually, if you're keen to get involved, we'll buy you half a ton of supplementary feed So a mix of kind of cereal and smaller seeds, of millet and smaller feed out there that actually, if you're prepared on 2 or 3 times a week to fill up the feeders that we'll buy for you and scatter seed on the ground to provide these kind of winter cafes, if you like, it's the right way of describing it for your wintering farm and birds, we'll use some of the lottery money to get you going. And brilliant response. They all said yes. So all 18 last year, the picture you got there with the lorry, that was the first 10 tons of food that we had delivered, and the Arctic was going around the little lanes delivering off the bags. And this year we've we've upped it now. It's 23 tons have gone out this year in total over the 2 years now. So the feed farmers are starting to put their feed out now. And this year, one of our farms, Ian, has used some of his own wheat to mix, essentially. So we're starting to, rather than buy it all in, to start to use some of the farmers' own resources. And I've had a brilliant response from that for the farmers, something really practical and tangible they can do and it's an instant result. And the birds come to their feeders, and a real kind of way of engaging and getting them involved. So the first of a number of collaborative projects that the group have all been able to do together. And I guess from a bird's perspective, there are now 18, well, there's 2 feeders on each farm, so 36 kind of feeding points, if you like, and a relatively small area that they can go to, as well as other habitat across the piece where they can go and feed. Second key bit of work, and this has made a big difference again, and thanks to the guys from the Bucks Island Raptor Group and the volunteers working with them. Lynn, I know you and others are on the call tonight, so thank you for all of your time and efforts in making this happen. What we've just completed, we've been a bit thwarted with wet weather and COVID, but 3 farms still to go, but completed farm surveys and box installations across cluster. 52 boxes have gone up. And I say 3 farms still to go. If we get a run of dry weather and we're COVID free in the new year, hopefully we can complete the picture. So either for barn owl, for tawny owl, for kestrel, or for little owl, depending on whether habitat's suitable, we're putting nest boxes up. Brilliant way of creating great habitat, yes, of course. On a cluster perspective, there are now 52 kind of opportunities, if you like, for our owls and our kestrels to come and nest or to winter and to roost, and proving that it's very important that we do provide these man-made nest boxes for them. But equally, a brilliant way of getting farmers out on site, getting them out and about, coming with us, looking at why is that tree more suitable than this tree, why this bit of the farm, why this habitat, and actually seeing something going up. They love that real practical kind of hands-on. So that's had a massive impact from a farmer's perspective, engaging them, and again on a collaborative perspective, on a scale, 18 farms now providing nest boxes for our owl species. That's also followed up with, and I've frozen again, so I'll keep talking. Followed up with a period of monitoring as well. So coming back in the spring, again this spring wasn't conducive to it. We missed a lot of the early, particularly tawny owls, lost a lot of the early monitoring. But later on in the spring, as COVID restrictions lifted, we're able to get back out and check on the boxes. And we'll just see, well, there we go, come through. So, and checking to ring any kind of birds that were in the boxes themselves, or to check on habitat. Now, this year wasn't a great year for owls, for barn owls in particular anyway, in terms of breeding, but really pleased that we had at least one nest with 2, where we managed to ring a couple of chicks, and likewise kestrel, 2 successful nests where 6 kestrel managed to ring. So you just see on the bottom right there, that's three young kestrel chicks still in the nest, and obviously barn owls, you all know, a young barn owl chick here that we rang at one of the farms on there. So again, the value of having more time on farm, of having Norman and the guys from Borg out there explaining about different habitats and explaining the life cycles, the various woes of owls, whilst also seeing birds in their hand, is incredibly powerful. So fingers crossed for a better breeding season next year. Yes, hopefully if our owl populations survive the winter and come back in abundant numbers, the owls will be more confident to breed. But a brilliant piece of work again, and collaborative piece of work with our partners and volunteers to put that together, and that monitoring will continue throughout the project. To be in slides, so I will just see if I can do something. So third thing, so we talked, then we started building, and I guess as these kind of projects roll out, farmers see a result. They love seeing a result, seeing something happen, something being delivered, something going up, or more importantly, seeing a bird in the hand. So we started then to build, say, well, we've done a lot on birds. What about therefore the habitat that the birds need? So we then started talking about field margins. And we started saying, well, actually, the value of not just to birds, but to our butterflies and to grassland around the kind of the wildflower margins. And we again put an offer out to our farms, and collectively they all kind of said, yeah, well, let's go for the 2 kilometre challenge. So we basically said, if you're prepared to give up as a group and to plant 2 kilometres of wildflower mix on margins, so 200 metres on one farm or 400 metres on another farm, we use the lottery money to buy the seed. And you can then plant, and then we'll work with you to monitor that as the seasons go. And brilliant response again, and we ended up with providing enough seed to plant just over 3 kilometres of new margins. So they've not all gone in yet. Some went in the spring. COVID got in the way a little bit of some of them, so some will go in next spring. But again, 3 kilometres of new wildflower-rich short grassland mix margins have gone in across the farms, again giving farmers something tangible to do, giving them support and us buying the seed and bringing it around and giving them advice on how best to plant and how to prepare the seed bed. They responded brilliantly to that, and we've got high hopes that those margins themselves will prove valuable, but also will be the kind of beginnings of wider work. So a number of collaborative things, just really kind of this unity across the cluster to do practical stuff is really starting to come to the fore. One thing we hadn't anticipated doing in the beginning of the spring, and I guess maybe because of all the kind of, I guess you would have seen as well in your particular patch, but the amount of people during COVID lockdown who were out exercising, walking in the Chilterns was, on one hand, fantastic to see. People rediscovering the area and rediscovering little nooks and crannies of the Chilterns they hadn't necessarily been to before. But it also created a lot of issues and a lot of frustration for our farms of people trespassing, of walking through crops, of walking dogs through crop fields. So we kind of said to the cluster, okay, well, let's see if we can do something about this. Let's see if we can design a series of kind of informative, informal, and hopefully useful signs that the general public hopefully will respond well to. If we design the artwork and we pull the signs together and we use, again, the lottery money to produce these signs, the farm said, brilliant, we'll put them up and we'll see if that's a way of beginning to just get some messages out, I guess, around either the habitat on the farms or the way that the farmers are working, this whole kind of field to fork concept, and welcome messages that, as opposed to the get off my land kind of message. So we produced 7 different designs. 3 of them are related to farming. So one we talked around, one specific to dairy farmers, one to arable farmers, and one to our beef and our livestock farmers. 3 were related to habitat. So one looking at some headline messages around grassland, one around hedges, and one around field margins. Then a more general one, just welcoming people to the farm, all carrying a please respect the countryside, keep your dog on a lead message, but also giving a bit of information that have all gone up. So interesting to see if you see many of these on your daily walks around the Chilterns, but a number of them are now up and about on the farms on key entry points to the farms themselves. And again, the farmers have responded brilliantly to that. And I think something we didn't necessarily think we were going to be doing in March, but actually during the summer it became something that really made a difference. So again, all building on this collaborative theme of working with the group itself. Slide. So a lot of collaboration, a lot of work on 18 times. We start to kind of make a difference when the farms are saying, well, actually, that's great. But in terms of habitat, where can I go to get advice? What advice can I get? Some of them are now wanting to say, well, and some of the photos here kind of explain it better there. So the bottom left is a picture of a workshop we ran with on hedgerow management. So experts coming in talking about different ways that Chilterns hedges can be managed, are managed, and the different pros and cons and benefits of hedgerow management. Some specific advice top left around a new wildflower meadow that's been planted. Coming back in and advising the landowner about how best to manage their meadows, and advice on some ponds. Is a pond there a temporal pond that normally probably will be full of water now? So specific advice on certain things, but also some farm specific work. So we've commissioned a number of hedgerow surveys. A guy called Nigel Adams, who lives up in Christmas Common area, absolute world leading expert in hedgerow management. So we've commissioned him to do a number of hedgerow surveys to help farmers understand what they can do with their hedges, either by way of planting or by way of management. The hedges. We've commissioned a number of management plans for some of our triple SIs. We have got a budget to provide the right expert for the right farm and the right piece of work as we've gone through. And that's starting now. I'm saying, oh yeah, I've now got the foundations, if you like, of what I can and should be doing on my farms and working through. So we're beginning to bring that advisory budget to bear, and we can bring in experts as I say, as are needed for individual farms and individual habitats. balls there. And as I say, so the farmers themselves say, it's great, I can get advice. But the bit that's making a real difference now, my colleague Harriet, I'm not sure she's on the call actually, is doing a great job now of actually, farmers saying, well, actually, the real kind of nuts and bolts of making it happen, letting contracts. Where do I go next? We've done a lot of that work for the farmers. Just those little barriers to give them the confidence to go on and crack on and actually turn the report into an actual project. So we've got 12 capital works contracts that we've either let or on the go at the moment. So capital works projects for doing things for scrub management or planting hedges or doing some of the actual hedgerow coppicing, those kind of areas. Number of contracts for supply of equipment, and so a growing number now for ecological advice, that we can take that barrier and that kind of piece of work away from the farmers and say, actually, when are you going to get time to go out and find quotes or get contractors to look at your hedgerow coppicing? Let us do that with you and for you, which means we can move along quicker and we can get work done on the ground, which is making a huge difference. So Harriet, behind the scenes, has been a sterling job in pulling those together and getting those out. And on the ground, that's a whole range of different things, from, as I say, from sourcing hedgerow whips. We're talking in a minute about some of the kilometres of hedgerow we've got either planted or I've got in the stocks for this winter. But sourcing whips from Woodland Trust or from contractors themselves. We've bought the feeders. We've been out scoping, measuring kind of maps for it, so we can pull together tenders to go out to contractors. Sourcing new hedgerow guards, we can see there, and also practical things as we get into the delivery side of things now, working with contractors on site. So a lot of contractors coming out for site visits, they wanted to scope and let tenders and work in that kind of stuff. Some of those kind of real time-consuming things that really need a lot of detailed attention, we can offer that to farmers. It means that they really respond to that kind of service and we get stuff done. We're starting to get more stuff done on the ground. So one of those kind of often overlooked areas, but it makes a massive difference. And that's all very well and good, but what about delivery? And we're starting to now get to the phase where the couple of years of relationship building is now starting to turn into real projects and real and sizable scale of things that are happening. So I haven't listed them all here, but just a couple of examples of things we're either live in delivery now, or we will be early into the new year. So 1,700, or just over 1,700 metres of new hedgerow planting going in across the Bradnam estate. In key areas on the back of the hedgerow survey that was commissioned. So we've been able to work with the Landowner, the National Trust and others to source contractors and whips and to get them in. They've started the gapping up side of it. They'll start the main hedgerow planting in the spring. And likewise, new stock fencing to protect the hedges that are going in and to make sure that the stock that are grazing on the site don't kind of trash the hedge. So big numbers here, almost a mile of new hedging going into one farm there. Promised Land Farm, a neighbouring farm. Again, this whole kind of neighbouring clustering concept that Lawton talked about here, when you get better connected, they're essentially the same hedgerows on two different land holdings. And we're planting just over 400 metres of new hedge there, doing a lot of coppicing work of some of the hedges that have not had too much TLC over the last few years, really need a bit of rejuvenation. So quite a lot of coppicing and a lot of fencing there. There's a beef farm there, and the cows are getting just too close to the hedge and not letting the hedge be a hedge. So looking at new fencing so the hedgerow can thrive and can grow. So big numbers of metres of hedge going in, but equally seeing more now. A lot of farms wanting to look, well, I've got a bit of an orchard left. It's not had much care. It needs a bit of rejuvenation. So last week we were out planting I think it was 7 Aylesbury prune and 2 green gage trees on Church Farm. So a wider range now of projects starting to come to the fore as farmers get further into this, and you should now start to see more hedgerow whips going in. You'll see more contractors out there, depending on whereabouts in the Chilterns is your patch, that should start to really kind of begin to rebuild the habitat, but also connect the habitat across the farm. And I wanted to just use a bit of a case study, really. Old Cullerdown Farm, for those of you who know, around the back of Prince's Risborough. It's probably the farm where we've done the most work. The landowner there was very keen right from the beginning of the project for us to work with them in terms of what they're doing across the farm. So the shaded area in pink is not entirety of the farm, but the bulk of the farm that we've helped. And the support there, really, we've been able to offer them. Yeah, so Kensington said, well, we've picked up the farm. What can we actually? We would like to get some advice on how we can manage the farm. So we commissioned a consultant to look at a whole farm plan for them. So looked at different options across the entirety of their farm, and in particular looked at Lodge Hill. Most of you will probably know Lodge Hill or have walked Lodge Hill or been around that area. Triple SI, that's part of the farm holding, that again hasn't had a huge amount of management in the last 20 years. So I was really getting into kind of unfavourable conditions. So we wrapped that all up and we paid for advice to pull together a report, but also then paid for the farmer to then enter countryside stewardship. So we've got a brand new higher tier agreement that started this January. Just be a year in January, going through. So it's a significant amount of resource that we've been able to help the farmers source. A lot of the barriers around stewardship applications, it's incredibly time consuming, very detailed process. It does actually put a lot of the farmers off. So we've been able to pay someone to help the landowner get through that kind of process. That's now turned into a piece of work across the farm that we'll see again around about just over a mile of new hedges being planted, some of which have already gone in, some of which will be going in the next year or so. Keen also to look at some hedge laying across a number of their hedges across the farm. They've put in a massive amount of new winter bird mix margins and areas across the farm, and at 1.6 hectares, so that's about 6 metre margins. So there's probably, I think, about 2 kilometres, I think, works out of new flower-rich field margins that have gone in across the farm. So a huge amount of new habitat that's been created. And the showpiece really being the massive amount of scrub clearance on Lodge Hill, which I guess some of you will have seen, or you've seen the contractors very active in the last few months in getting out there and really hitting the scrub hard. So the chalk grassland habitat that's there can actually thrive again. It's getting very scrubbed over and very kind of covered up in scrub. So, and we've been able to help the farmer through that process over the last 2 years, from initial advice to initial ideas to a stewardship application, to now taking board a lot of those projects and helping them on the ground to be delivered, which are now starting to get the kind of scale that we hope for at the beginning of the project itself. So I just wanted to share with you, probably I think it's about a 5-minute video. We've commissioned a couple of students. They only just sent this back to me today, actually. So to give a first airing, if you like, of just a kind of before and a during video, if you like, of just what's been going on at Lodge Hill and the scale of the piece of work. May need a little bit of editing, but it'd be good to get a first airing. So hoping, if the video works, you'll be able to get a bit of an aerial view, a bit of understanding of what's been going on at Lodge Hill in the last couple of months or so. So I'll press play and hope for the best.
There is a life I lead in this city, hurrying to cut my teeth. I can take what I need to get by, it doesn't make it easy. The other piece of my heart moves slow, somewhere in the great unknown. When I return from the afterglow, will you carry me like I am whole again? Wait, hold on, put me together, take me back where I belong. I want it all, I had a feeling, but the feeling is all gone. Wait, hold on, put me together, take me back where I belong. I want it all, I had a feeling, but the feeling is all gone.
Well, hi and welcome to Old Caladown Farm near Bedlow in Buckinghamshire, nestled in the centre of the Chilterns area of outstanding natural beauty. And we're here today to get very exciting progress on some scrub clearance and some habitat management work we've been doing with the landowner here through the Chalk, Cherries and Chairs Landscape Partnership Scheme, funded by the National Lottery, and also through the government DEFRA funded Countryside Stewardship Scheme. So Lodge Hill, we're standing here today, fantastic area of really important chalk grassland, really important habitat for the Chilterns, and home to some really rare butterflies and a fantastic assemblage of chalk grassland species. So a really important site, but a site that, as you maybe have to see as you work through, has had a lot of work done on it. in terms of trying to improve the habitat for the species here. So we've been working with the landowner over the last couple of years now, really, to put together a funding package to do a number of things across the farm, focusing on hedgerow planting with lots of wildflower mixes and pollen nectar mixes across the farm, but most importantly, a massive piece of scrub clearance and habitat restoration on Lodge Hill itself, which is a site of special scientific interest. So we've been working with Maidencroft, and essentially the first phase of the work is to manage a massive piece of scrub clearance, kind of 10-15-year-old scrub work that really was shading out and crowding out the chalk grassland species, which meant we were losing a number of our butterflies and a number of our specialist grassland species here. So why do we do the scrub clearance work? And as you can see around to the right, the work here that Maidencroft have done so far essentially is to open up the grassland, to create more light and to open up the seed bank so the chalk grassland species have a chance to grow, have a chance to thrive and spread more across the site. And a number of the chalk grassland species that butterflies are so dependent on. So really exciting to be able to share with you today the kind of extent of the work that's been done. The work is still in progress today. Great to go and see some more work in action as we explore on the site.
My name's Dave. I'm team leader up on the Lodge Hill, where we've been for nearly 6 weeks now. And there's 4 of us in the team today. Majority of the time it's 3, but there's 4 of us today. And 2 of the guys are hand cutting. I'm in the Kubota with the grapple, which is a 5-ton Kubota, which is a low ground pressure machine with rubber tracks, so as not to do too much in the way of damage on the precious soil. And we've got Tony in the forestry Valtra with the timber crane, loading the scrub, taking it off the triple SI down to the fire site, down the hill. And yeah, the job's going well so far. Well, we're working to obviously a map, and we've got a GPS positioning set up on my phone, which can position us exactly where we need to be. And each area was an area that used to be grazed. We can tell now that it's not just a random kind of thing that he's drawn. It is an actual area that was grazed, and it's getting easier to see. The more we do, it's easier to see. So we're getting areas which are 10%. This area that we're on now is a 5%, so we're going to have 5% left of scrub cover. And we've got 50% just up above us. Over there we've got another 5. We've got a few points of interest, 2 or 3 junipers this end. We've got a juniper the other end.
So what next really after the scrub clearance? So once the scrub clearance work, that essentially is phase 1 of the work. Massive piece of work over the last 6 or 7 weeks to clear the site and to get the seed bank energised. But that's only half the story. So once the scrub clearance is finished, we're then working with the landowner to put in a lot more stock fencing around the site, so we're able to graze the site. So making sure the site is proof and the fencing is in good condition for the stock to be able to graze the site. We're also working to reinstall water. So when the cattle here grazing, the cattle have got water they can obviously drink, and it's a key part of the stock management for the site itself. And we're also installing down at the bottom of the hill, which you won't be able to see from here, a stock pen. So the grazier is able to manage the stock all ready essentially for hopefully in the new year for cattle to arrive on site and to then begin to graze. And that's the really important part of the management of the site. The continual grazing of the site, keeping the scrub in check, disturbing the seed bank and disturbing the moss, so the flowers and the plants really have chance to grow and to recreate that really important chalk grassland habitat that we've been working so hard to achieve. And of course, none of this exciting work would be possible without the fantastic support that the National Lottery Heritage Fund have provided for the Chalk, Cherries and Chairs Landscape Partnership Scheme, and likewise the support of DEFRA and of government agencies through the Countryside Stewardship Agreement that we've been able to fund this work. So a massive thank you to the supporters, and looking forward to come the spring when we might see some more butterflies and see the grassland coming into its own.
Can I get out of the video if I come to my slide? Yes. So a video there put together, interestingly, from two 17-year-old students put that video together for us. They got various bits of kit from their college and did it as one of their student projects. So all the clunkiness and little bits of edits and it's a fantastic job they've done, and hoping bring the project to life and the scale of the project to life really, and as a direct result of the advice and the farmer being involved in the cluster group itself. So hopefully in 2 or 3 years time we'll have lots more case studies like this of larger scale pieces of work where we can really achieve that habitat creation on a scale. Now we're going back again. I didn't mean to do that. Apologies for that. So the last part of the offer is with the advice and the fulfillment and the delivery and helping the farmers actually get stuff done is monitoring. And that's really where I think the work that you've been doing with this brilliantly over the last 6 months or so really starts to come to the fore in lots of different ways, in really A, helping farmers understand what they've got, but B, knowing if we're making a difference. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we do all this work because we want the wildlife to thrive. We want them to get up the numbers or get new species recovering and understand what's happening on the ground. So we've been able with the project to do a number of things, looking at some habitat work. So we've commissioned rapid habitat assessments where we can very easily, and it lends itself brilliantly to volunteer work. But I'm hoping that a number of you will want to be involved in some of these when we get going on these in the spring and summer next year. Or we can look very easily at the condition of a site. Are we getting more of the kind of species we want to have and less of the species we don't want to have? It lends itself brilliantly, particularly to grassland projects, either at Sands Bank or Lodge Hill or some of the other sites that we're working on from a grassland side of things. So we're doing more and more of that kind of piece of work to give that objective evidence base as to what's happening. And as a piece of that, and again, Pete, a massive thank you to yourself and to Lynn and Jenny and the others who've been involved in the ringing project. A brilliant way of not only engaging farmers, but really getting to some detail about finding out what's happening to, particularly in this case, our farmer birds. Been able to kind of track and understand the health of the birds, the numbers of the birds that are there, and also beginning to kind of use the data, get some ringing recoveries to see what actually is happening across the cluster for our birds that are there. Started off working. I could just ask if everybody could just mute themselves, if that's okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Probably do that myself. But if you could mute yourself, that would be brilliant, just so we're not getting the background noise. But 3 farms last winter. So it's a winter ringing project there, and Pete, I think you rang just under 340 birds in the end, 19 of which were corn bunting. So really important results there for probably our more scarce kind of farmer bird there, and I think that represents something like about a quarter of all the adult corn buntings that rung in the country last winter. So again, an impact on a scale, if you like, across the piece, and significant numbers of yellowhammer rung as well. And this winter, a number more ringers wanted to get involved, and we're now been able to expand that project out to 5 farms. So hopefully over the period of the project, over 5 years, we start to build a real understanding of what's happening to our farmland birds. So thanks again, Pete, Lynn, and others for all your effort, and Carl and Paul and all your effort in putting that piece of work together. It makes a massive difference. It makes a massive difference on a landscape scale, but it also does on a real detailed scale. So this corn bunting here, I'm not sure if Pete, you ever gave him a name, but a regular at Smaldene. And to prove the impact of ringing, this bird was caught a couple of times last winter, I think, but you had them, and the difference, it was about 3 grams heavier. Second time it was caught, if I've got my stats right, might be slightly wrong, but maybe the odd gram out here. But from a farmer's perspective, the first time that bird was caught was before the supplementary feeding had started, and then was 3 grams heavier a month later, pretty much a month after supplementary feeding had started. So we can't draw complete direct cause and effect, but from a farmer, he could really see the difference he was making with the supplementary feeding to the ringing, and that bird is now fitter, healthier, weighing more as he come in. So those bits of detail are just absolute gems from a scientific perspective, but an engagement perspective as well. So it's making a huge difference there. We've got plans to expand out into next spring, so I haven't set these up yet. We've got an agreement working with the Bucks Mammal Group to look at a small mammal surveying project as well. So we're just going through and buying various Longworth traps and all the various kit for the group. We're going to work on 3 farms initially and do a 1 visit per season across those 3 farms to look at what's happening with our small mammals, whether we've still got harvest mice. We know a number of farms still have harvest mice on them, but what's happening with our bank voles and other small mammals. Again, just another piece of insight to understand what's picking up. And likewise, even more exciting, if we can find some corrugated. Anybody got any corrugated iron knocking around or hear of any? Please let me know. We wanted to set up a piece of work putting out refugia, reptile tins essentially across farms, to hopefully give us an understanding of of where we have our slow worms or touchwoods, some grass snakes, and we know one of the records of common lizard. So we wanted to put out a number of tins across all the farms and then regularly go back and check and just understand what's there, what are we actually seeing across the farm. So branching out from birds into other areas, all providing that rich base of engagement, but also monitoring with the farm cluster work. And then what next? Well, I guess with the cluster is really only starting now to get some momentum in terms of delivery, as I said before. So we've just commissioned an all farm. I'm really excited the farms have all said yes to this. We just commissioned 4 contractors, 4 consultants to go out there and complete whole farm plans across every farm in the cluster. So, but this time, well, this in the spring, April, when they're all complete, we'll have complete option maps for habitat improvements across all 18 farms that we'll be able to put together. To look at things, again, looking at this landscape scale, where can we improve our hedgerow? Where can we get more hedgerows? How can we connect hedgerows? How can we connect field margins and other habitat options across the whole of the cluster itself? Which I'm hoping will then lead to a number of larger scale projects, whether it's entry into countryside stewardship, or whether that's entry into direct projects with ourselves. So that really, to me, is then the turning point, I think, for the project. If farms are prepared to go for that, we start to get more of the Lodge Hills and the Old Colour Down farm scale projects coming through. So hopefully this time next year, more to report on that one. And equally, we're working with a contractor to start to pull together a project looking at carbon across farms. So not just around wildlife, but obviously climate change, critically important, the way that farmers use their soil. So we're hoping that we can get a bit of training for some of our farmers to do some carbon audits across their farms and some soil analysis that will then hopefully lead to wider projects we can roll out with them around improving whether it's no-till farming or other techniques out there. But that's in the early stages of development at the moment. So we're starting to get again to branch out from wildlife into other areas, which is very exciting. So what about your work? Where does your work fit in? All your work you were doing last spring, and hopefully springs will come through in terms of tracking the impact. But on a landscape scale, by being able to track our plants, our butterflies and our bird numbers in a systematic way, in a structured way, in a robust way, really starts to paint a picture of what's happening on that scale. So yes, we can do the individual farm-based monitoring. When you piece it together, when we have that bank of data, and we can start to piece together and all the pink squares across tracking the impact, we start to know we can start to then make some correlations. And this is a long-term piece of work. Long-term, we need a lot of data to be able to do this, but that's really where the scheme was designed, to give us that kind of ability to look above things and see what all these miles of hedgerow you're planting and all these miles of field margins and grassland work, is it making a difference on a landscape scale? And that's the power and the beauty of all the effort that you're putting in on the ground to go out there and track what's happening for our birds, our butterflies and plants, where it all knits together. Slightly frustrating from last winter, as you'll know and love. We had set out at the beginning of the spring to have coverage of about 60% of our squares, hopefully, and of training programs and a whole piece of work that was either cancelled, postponed, or rearranged. But thanks again for all of your efforts. We have got off to a good start last year. 29 of the squares have been covered from a bird's perspective, 1 visit. So we've got the beginnings of some data coming in from birds. And we had 26 species of butterfly recorded across 12 squares on the limited amount of times that you're able to get out. Even on the limited amount of times you're able to get out and do your butterfly surveys last year, we're still starting to get the beginnings of some mapping of where our species of butterflies are. And similarly with plants, 10 squares covered, but 187 species of plant recorded that specific to the Chilterns. So as time, if you project forward 4 or 5 years, when we're starting to hopefully get some full survey coverage across the patch, you can see where your data really starts to knit, and we can say, well, actually, our corn buntings are doing okay, or our chalky or blue butterflies are starting to spread, or the numbers and abundance change. So vitally important work you're doing in support of the cluster and the other pieces of work on the ground that we're delivering. So a massive thank you really to finish that the work you're doing through tracking the impacts, and hopefully you will be keen again to get involved this spring, is part of this bigger plan. We're bringing volunteers and farmers and ecologists and ourselves coming together to really support landscape scale conservation. We're not breaking it all off, and ecologists doing their bits and farmers doing their bits, and actually that partnership, I guess, between yourselves and the farmers and bringing the technical expertise is really where we're starting to make a difference. So that's where we hope the project is going. hopefully next year we'll be able to cement that further with more evidence and more of an evidence base and more examples of practical conservation work. But your work really does dovetail in and really does knit and really does energise the farmers. The farmers report back every time how excited they are that you're coming onto their farms and helping them with their understanding of what's happening. So a massive thank you on this dark, wet December night. Doesn't really kind of feel like going to get out butterfly service. We're only 3 months away from the beginning of the next season. So touchwood, COVID will allow us to get the full programme in place this year, and we'll be able to really look at some better mapping of where our species are and what we're finding out on the ground. So I hope it's been useful. A bit of a whistle-stop tour of the work of the cluster itself, but starting to hopefully make a difference on the ground out there, and you should see some of that when you're out about this winter on your farm and walk. So thank you for listening. I'll stop sharing my screen and happy to take any kind of questions. I haven't checked on the chat at all, so apologies for if your questions are there. But if anyone wants to kick off with a question, I've got as long as you want, as long as you've got patience for in terms of any questions you have. So anybody want to kick off with any burning question or a comment, and we'll take things from there.